I'm Julio, 35 years old, and I worked my entire life to buy my dream home. After years of saving, I finally had my perfect place. Then last month I returned early from a business trip to find my house under construction. My bathroom was gutted, my kitchen demolished, and my sister Rachel was directing workers like she owned the place. "We're renovating before moving in," she announced, while her husband Marcus and his parents laughed at my shocked expression. I just said okay and walked out. The next day she called in panic. "There are 5 police cars in front of the house. If you've ever had family take advantage of your kindness, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear how I handled this nightmare situation." My parents came to America from Mexico when they were in their 20s, bringing nothing but their work ethic and dreams for a better life. They instilled in me the values of education, perseverance, and financial responsibility from an early age. In this country, you can achieve anything if you work hard enough. My father would tell me while coming home exhausted from his construction job. My mother cleaned houses during the day and took night shifts at a local factory. Their sacrifices weren't lost on me. I took those lessons to heart. During high school, I discovered my talent for computers and coding. While my friends were hanging out at the mall or playing video games, I was taking extra classes and working part-time at a local computer repair shop. When college came around, I didn't have the luxury of parents who could afford my tuition. I put myself through a state university by working 2 jobs, one at the campus IT department during weekdays and another at a restaurant on weekends. Many nights I survived on just 4 hours of sleep, but I never complained. This was my American dream in the making. After graduation, my hard work paid off when I landed a junior software engineering position at TechSphere, a growing company in the industry. I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and saving every penny I could. While my colleagues bought new cars or took expensive vacations, I drove a 15-year-old Honda and invested my bonuses. My goal was clear: I wanted to own a home before I turned 35, something my parents had never achieved despite decades of hard work. Last year, that dream finally became reality. After nearly a decade of saving and climbing the corporate ladder to become a senior software architect, I purchased a beautiful craftsman-style home in Pine Ridge Estates, a peaceful suburb with tree-lined streets and the sense of community. The house wasn't perfect, it needed updates and had some outdated features, but it was mine. I spent 2 years renovating it carefully, selecting every fixture, paint color, and piece of furniture. The kitchen was my pride and joy, with custom cabinets and a quartz waterfall island that I'd designed myself. The bathroom featured a walk-in shower with river rock flooring and a rainfall shower head that made every morning feel like a spa visit. My relationship with my sister Rachel has always been complicated. Being 5 years younger, she grew up as the baby of the family, and I can't deny she was treated differently than I was. Where I faced strict rules and high expectations, Rachel received endless second chances and reduced responsibilities. Our parents worked slightly less demanding jobs by the time she was a teenager, which meant more attention and resources were available for her. This dynamic created a pattern that continued into adulthood. Rachel would frequently borrow things without asking: my car, my laptop, even money from my wallet. When confronted, she'd act wounded, as if my boundaries were a personal attack on her. "We're family," she would say. "Why are you being so selfish?" Our parents usually took her side, reminding me that, as the older brother, I should be more understanding and generous. Despite these frustrations, I still cared deeply for my sister. 3 years ago, when she met Marcus, I was hopeful. He seemed responsible and level-headed, working as a sales manager for a local dealership. For the first time, Rachel appeared to be settling down, talking about career goals, and even saving for her own place. I genuinely liked Marcus and thought he was a positive influence on her. Their wedding was a joyous occasion, and I gave them a generous gift to help them start their life together. After buying my house, I took immense pride in making it truly mine. The front porch featured handcrafted rocking chairs where I enjoyed my morning coffee. The living room had built-in bookshelves that I filled with my collection of science fiction novels and technical books. My home office was meticulously arranged with dual monitors and a standing desk, perfect for the occasional work-from-home days. Every corner reflected my personality and taste. The house wasn't just a financial investment, it represented everything I'd worked for. When my parents first visited, My father had tears in his eyes. "This is why we came to this country," he said, squeezing my shoulder. Those words meant everything to me. Last month I was scheduled to attend an important technology conference in Seattle. As the lead architect for our company's new cloud platform, I was presenting our innovation to industry leaders. The conference was originally planned for 2 weeks, with my presentation scheduled for the final day. I had prepared extensively, creating detailed slides and rehearsing my talk multiple times. 3 days into the conference, I received notice that due to a scheduling conflict with the venue, the remaining sessions would be condensed. My presentation was moved up, and the conference would now end 2 days earlier than planned. After successfully delivering my presentation, which was met with enthusiastic interest from several potential clients, I decided to head home early rather than staying in Seattle. I was looking forward to spending the unexpected free time relaxing in my house, maybe catching up on some yard work, or simply enjoying my peaceful space. Little did I know that returning early would uncover a situation that would test my patience, resolve, and family bonds in ways I never imagined. The 5-hour drive home from Seattle was pleasant. Spring had arrived in full force, painting the Pacific Northwest in vibrant greens and colorful wildflowers. I had my windows down, enjoying the fresh air and the playlist of my favorite classic rock songs. My mind wandered between reflecting on the successful presentation and planning the small home improvement projects I might tackle with my unexpected free time. Maybe I'd finally install those floating shelves in the guest bedroom, or repair the loose board on the back deck. As I turned onto my street, the peaceful anticipation quickly dissolved. 3 unfamiliar vehicles were parked in my driveway. A white pickup truck with a contractor logo, a red SUV I'd never seen before, and Marcus's black sedan. My first thought was that perhaps Rachel and Marcus were visiting and had brought friends, but something felt off. Why would they be at my house when they thought I was away? Approaching my front door, I heard unusual sounds, the high-pitched whine of power tools hammering, and multiple voices calling to each other. My stomach tightened as I inserted my key and pushed the door open. The entryway that normally welcomed me with warm beige walls and a tasteful console table was now cluttered with drop cloths, toolboxes, and building materials. A fine layer of dust covered everything. The hardwood floors I had painstakingly refinished were scratched in several places from what looked like something heavy being dragged across them. Following the noise, I first went to the bathroom off the hallway. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. My beautiful bathroom with its custom tile work and glass shower door had been completely gutted. The shower was nothing but exposed studs and pipes, the vanity was missing, and the toilet had been removed, leaving just a hole in the floor with a rag stuffed into it. A middle-aged man in work clothes was measuring the space, making marks on the bare drywall. In shock, I continued to the kitchen. If the bathroom was bad, the kitchen was a disaster zone. My beloved custom cabinets had been ripped from the walls, leaving gaping holes where the anchors had been. The quartz countertops were gone. My refrigerator and range had been disconnected and pushed to the center of the room. 2 workers were discussing something about plumbing lines while gesturing at an exposed wall. My prized possessions hadn't escaped either. The vintage record player my grandfather had given me, normally displayed on a special shelf, was now sitting precariously on top of a stack of boxes. Family photos had been removed from walls and piled haphazardly on the dining table. My collection of signed first edition books had been shoved into a cardboard box labeled Julio's Stuff in unfamiliar handwriting. Dumbfounded and increasingly angry, I followed the sound of a woman's voice to my living room. There stood Rachel, holding what appeared to be design plans, directing a young worker about placement for something. She hadn't noticed me yet. Marcus sat in my armchair, scrolling through his phone, while an older couple who I recognized as his parents, Walter and Patricia, stood by the bay window, pointing and discussing something about the space. What the hell is going on here? I finally managed to ask, my voice strained with the effort of not shouting. Rachel spun around, her expression shifting from concentration to surprise. "Julio, oh my God, you're back early." She clutched the papers to her chest, looking momentarily like a child caught misbehaving. Marcus jumped up from the chair, clearly startled. "Hey man, we didn't expect you for another couple days." Walter and Patricia exchanged glances before Walter stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "You must be the brother. Nice place you've got here. or it will be once we're done with the improvements. Improvements. My mind was racing trying to process what I was seeing. Rachel, why is my house being torn apart? Who are all these people? Rachel's initial shock quickly gave way to a casual attitude that was even more infuriating. She waved her hand dismissively. Don't be so dramatic. We're just doing some renovations before we move in. The bathroom was totally outdated, and that kitchen was never going to work for us. Move in, I repeated, unable to process what I was hearing. What are you talking about? Marcus came to stand beside Rachel, putting his arm around her waist. We were going to surprise you when you got back. We're going to be staying here for a while. Patricia chimed in from across the room. They need a proper place to start their family. That apartment of theirs is much too small. Walter nodded in agreement. And this place has plenty of room. You don't need all this space for just one person. Rachel smiled brightly as if this explanation cleared everything up. See? It makes perfect sense. And we knew the place needed updating, so we thought we'd take care of that while you were away. Surprise. I looked around at my demolished home. My privacy invaded, my possessions disrespected. The entitled expressions on their faces made it clear they saw absolutely nothing wrong with what they'd done. Patricia must have noticed my expression because she laughed and said to Walter, "Look at his face, I told you he'd be surprised." Walter joined in the laughter. "Don't worry, son. I'm overseeing all the work myself. Used to be a contractor before I retired. Everything will be up to code. Well, mostly." More laughter from Marcus and his parents. Rachel smiled, uncertainly watching my reaction. In that moment, a strange calm came over me. Years of conflict resolution training at work kicked in, reminding me that the worst decisions are made in anger. Instead of the explosive reaction they probably expected, perhaps even hoped for, to paint me as unreasonable, I simply said, "Okay." "Okay," Rachel repeated clearly, thrown by my subdued response. "Yes, okay." I turned and walked back outside to my car, closing the door behind me. Once in the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, taking deep breaths to steady myself. Through the window I could see Rachel and Marcus watching me from the front door, confusion evident on their faces. They clearly hadn't anticipated this reaction. I needed space to think, to process what had happened, and decide on my next steps. One thing was certain: this situation was far from okay, and I had no intention of letting it continue. After composing myself in the car, I texted Rachel to meet me outside. I needed answers without the audience of Marcus's parents and the construction workers. She emerged from the house a few minutes later, looking annoyed rather than apologetic. "What's the problem?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. "I thought you said it was okay." I kept my voice level. "Rachel, you're tearing apart my house without permission. Nothing about this is okay. I need you to explain exactly what's happening here." Her defensive posture relaxed slightly as she launched into her explanation. Marcus lost his job last month. The dealership downsized, and he was one of the newer sales managers, so they let him go. We couldn't afford our apartment anymore, and we were trying to figure out what to do. "And you didn't think to call me and ask for help?" I asked. "We did something better," she continued, a hint of pride in her voice. "Walter and Patricia suggested we move in with you. You have this big house, all to yourself, and family should help family right. But the place needed some updates to work for us, so we thought we'd take care of that while you were gone. It was going to be a win-win." I stared at her in disbelief. "So instead of asking if you could stay with me temporarily, you decided to break in and renovate my house?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "We didn't break in. I have a key, remember? You gave it to me last year to water your plants when you went to that coding boot camp. That was for emergencies and specific situations when I asked you to check on the house. Not for you to move in and remodel without my knowledge," I clarified, remembering that I had indeed given her a spare key, a decision I now deeply regretted. "Whatever. The point is, we're doing you a favor. Those bathrooms were ancient, and your kitchen was so impractical. Walter knows what he's doing, and we're paying for everything. Well, his retirement fund is, but he says it's an investment in our future." Her casual dismissal of my ownership and boundaries was infuriating, but I maintained my composure. Show me exactly what you've done so far, and what you're planning. Rachel seemed to take my request as acceptance, her face brightening as she led me back inside. The full tour revealed even more damage than I'd initially seen. In the master bathroom, they had removed the soaking tub I'd installed just a year ago, a tub that had cost me nearly $3,000. When I asked where it was, Rachel shrugged and said Walter had taken it to some recycling place because it wasn't their style. The kitchen was worse up close. My custom cabinets, which I'd commissioned from a local artisan, had been carelessly ripped out and were now sitting in pieces in my garage. The quartz countertops were nowhere to be found. When questioned, Rachel mentioned they'd been donated since they were planning to install granite instead. Granite is much more now anyway, she said, as if doing me a favor by replacing my carefully chosen materials with their preferences. In my office, I discovered they had already begun removing my built-in desk and bookshelves. Books and papers were piled in corners, and my computer equipment had been unplugged and stacked haphazardly on the floor. "We need this room for the nursery," Rachel explained casually. "Nursery? What nursery?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant. Marcus's parents want to be close by for their first grandchild, so they'll be staying in the guest room for a while after the baby comes." The hits kept coming. Not only were Rachel and Marcus planning to move in, but his parents would be joining them too, and they expected me to just accept this complete takeover of my home. While examining the damage to my office, I spotted architectural plans spread out on a folding table. Looking more closely, I saw they detailed changes to the entire house, removing walls, rearranging rooms, even plans for converting my basement into what was labeled as Julio's suite. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the basement conversion. Rachel had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, once the baby comes, we'll need more space upstairs. Walter thought you might be more comfortable with your own little apartment in the basement. It would give everyone more privacy." I was speechless. They weren't just planning a temporary stay, they were systematically taking over my entire house and relegating me to the basement. While Rachel continued showing me around, highlighting all their improvements, I overheard a conversation between Walter and Patricia in the dining room that confirmed my worst suspicions. "It worked better than we expected," Walter was saying in a low voice. "Once we're fully moved in, it'll be nearly impossible for him to kick us out. Tenant rights and all that." Patricia nodded. "And with the baby coming, he'll look like a monster if he tries to make us leave. It's perfect. Besides, he's single. What does he need all this space for? Just make sure Rachel keeps him distracted while we get the rest of our stuff moved in this weekend," Walter added. "The more established we are, the better." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a misunderstanding or my sister's typical entitlement. This was a calculated plan to take advantage of me and essentially steal my home. They had waited until I was away, deliberately started major renovations that would be difficult to reverse, and planned to establish themselves as tenants, to make eviction legally challenging. Looking at my demolished home and listening to their scheming, I realized I needed to act quickly and decisively. This wasn't just about boundaries anymore. It was about protecting what I had worked my entire life to achieve. After overhearing Walter and Patricia's conversation, I knew I needed to approach this situation strategically. Years of project management had taught me that the best solutions come from careful planning rather than reactive decisions. I would need to be smart about this. I returned to Rachel in the living room, forcing a resigned expression. "This is a lot to take in," I said, running my hand through my hair for added effect. "I'm still processing everything, but I want to understand the full scope of what you're planning." Rachel, clearly relieved that I wasn't shouting or throwing them out, became enthusiastic. "We have so many great ideas. Patricia has incredible taste. She watches all those home renovation shows. And Walter used to build custom homes before he retired, so he knows exactly what adds value." "Show me the plans," I requested, sounding as interested as I could manage. If this is happening, I should at least know what my house is going to look like. For the next hour, I listened attentively, as Rachel, Marcus, and his parents walked me through their comprehensive renovation plans. I asked detailed questions about materials, timeline, and costs, making mental notes of every admission. They had no permits, no professional contractors beyond the day laborers, Walter had hired and were making structural changes that definitely required building department approval. When Rachel mentioned they were planning to knock down the wall between the kitchen and dining room the following day, I nodded thoughtfully. That's a big job. Are you sure it's not a load-bearing wall? Walter waved dismissively. I know what I'm doing. Been in construction 40 years. Don't need some city inspector telling me my business. Fair enough, I said, noticing Patricia's smug smile at her husband's confidence. And all these workers are licensed and insured. They're good guys, Walter replied vaguely. Cash jobs, you know how it is. Keeps the costs down. I nodded as if this made perfect sense, while internally documenting another violation. Throughout the conversation, I occasionally took out my phone pretending to check messages while actually photographing the damage and recording parts of our conversation. Listen, I finally said, checking my watch, this is a lot to process. I need some time to think. Would you mind if I grab a few things and stay at a hotel tonight? I'm still pretty wiped from the conference. Rachel looked at Marcus uncertainly, but Patricia jumped in. Of course. You must be exhausted and all this construction mess isn't restful. Take your time getting used to the idea. We'll keep things moving forward here. I'm sure she thought she was being clever, encouraging my absence so they could continue their takeover unimpeded. I simply smiled and thanked her for understanding. I'll just grab some clothes and my laptop, I said, heading toward my bedroom, which thankfully they hadn't completely dismantled yet. Once there, I quickly collected more than just overnight essentials. I gathered all my important documents, property deed insurance papers, tax returns, and secured them in my briefcase. I also packed irreplaceable items like my grandfather's watch and the small wooden box containing family photographs too precious to lose. While packing, I discreetly took more photos of the damage throughout the house from angles that clearly showed the extensive nature of their unauthorized renovations. Before leaving, I made a show of asking when they'd all be going out to dinner, pretending I might join them later if I felt up to it. Marcus mentioned they had reservations at 7 at an Italian place downtown. Perfect, I said. I'll text you if I decide to come. Otherwise, I'll check in tomorrow morning. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror to see Rachel, Marcus, and his parents standing in my doorway looking pleased with themselves. They thought they had won, that I was retreating to process the inevitable change to my living situation. Their complacency would work to my advantage. Instead of heading to a hotel, I drove straight to the home of Thomas Anderson, a friend from college who now worked as a real estate attorney. I had attended his housewarming just a month ago and knew he'd be home. After a quick call to make sure he was available, I arrived at his place and laid out the entire situation. Thomas listened intently, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your sister used an emergency key to enter your home while you were away, brought in unlicensed contractors to perform major renovations without permits, disposed of your personal property, and is planning to move her entire family in all, without your permission. That's exactly right, I confirmed. And based on what I overheard, they're deliberately trying to establish tenancy to make it difficult for me to remove them later. Thomas shook his head in disbelief. This is unbelievable, but unfortunately not uncommon. Family disputes over property can get incredibly messy. The good news is you've caught this early and have clear documentation of unauthorized entry and property damage. We spent the next 3 hours developing a comprehensive plan. Thomas advised me to contact my homeowner's insurance immediately to report the damage. He also suggested reaching out to the city building department first thing in the morning to report unpermitted construction work. What about the legal aspects of removing them, I asked. They have a key and could claim I gave them permission. That's why we need to act quickly before they can establish any claim of tenancy, Thomas explained. Right now, this is clearly trespassing and property damage. They have no lease, no rental agreement, and no evidence that you consented to any of this. The fact that they waited until you were away and are making these changes without permits works strongly in your favor. Thomas helped me draft formal notices of trespass and began preparing potential legal filings if needed. He also advised me to contact the local police department to have officers present when I returned to the house, both to keep the peace and to officially document the situation. One more thing, Thomas added as we wrapped up our planning. Change your locks immediately and update your home security. If your sister made copies of your key, which seems likely, you need to ensure they can't re-enter once removed. By the time I left Thomas's house, it was nearly midnight. I checked into a nearby hotel, exhausted but feeling more in control. Before going to sleep, I made several important calls for the morning to my insurance company, the building department, and a locksmith who offered emergency services. As I lay in bed, I thought about Rachel and how our relationship had come to this point. Part of me felt guilty for the strict measures I was planning to take, but I reminded myself that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding or a case of taking minor liberties. This was a calculated attempt to take advantage of me and essentially steal my home, the home I had worked my entire life to afford. Sometimes setting firm boundaries with family isn't just appropriate, it's necessary. The next morning began with a flurry of activity. I was up at 6, making calls and finalizing my plan. My first call was to the building department, where I reported unauthorized construction happening at my address. The official I spoke with was extremely concerned when I mentioned structural walls being removed without permits, and immediately arranged for an inspector to meet me at the house. Next, I called my insurance company to report the damage. They were equally alarmed and assigned an adjuster to assess the situation as soon as possible. They also advised me to document everything with photos and written descriptions, which I had already begun doing. My third call was to the police non-emergency line. I explained the situation. Unauthorized persons had entered my home while I was away and were causing significant property damage. The dispatcher agreed to send officers to accompany me back to the house, both to keep the peace and to document the situation officially. Finally, I contacted a locksmith who specialized in emergency services, arranging for them to meet me at the house later to change all the locks and potentially upgrade the security system. With these preparations in place, I drove back to my home, arriving just before 9 in the morning. As planned, 2 police cruisers were already waiting nearby, along with a vehicle from the city building department. I briefed them quickly on the situation before approaching the house. As we walked up the driveway, I noticed additional vehicles had arrived overnight. A moving truck was now parked on the street, and boxes were stacked on my front porch. They had clearly accelerated their move-in plans after my departure the previous evening. Before we reached the door, my phone rang. It was Rachel, her voice tight with panic. "Julio, what's going on? There are 5 police cars in front of the house." "I'll be right there to explain," I replied calmly, hanging up before she could respond. When I unlocked the front door, the scene inside was even more chaotic than the day before. The workers had already arrived and were in the process of demolishing the wall between my kitchen and dining room. Half of it was gone, exposing electrical wiring and plumbing pipes. More of Marcus and Rachel's furniture had appeared overnight. Their couch was now in my living room, and boxes labeled kitchen and bedroom were stacked throughout the house. Rachel, Marcus, and his parents stood in the entryway, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as they saw the officers and building inspector behind me. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, stepping forward. "Why are the police here?" I remained calm and professional. "I've brought the authorities to address the unauthorized construction and property damage happening in my home." The building inspector stepped forward, introducing himself, and immediately expressing concern about the exposed wiring and partially demolished wall. "Is there a permit for this work?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Walter puffed up his chest. "I'm supervising this job personally. Been a contractor for 40 years. May I see your current contractor's license and the approved permits for this project?" the inspector asked. Walter's confidence faltered. "We're just doing some family renovations. Didn't think we needed all that red tape for helping out my son-in-law's brother." "Sir, any structural modifications, electrical work, or plumbing changes require permits," the inspector explained firmly. "And only licensed contractors can legally perform such work. I'll need all construction to cease immediately while I inspect the property for code violations and safety hazards." As the inspector began his assessment, one of the police officers turned to me. "Sir, can you clarify who owns this property and who is authorized to be here?" "I am the sole owner," I stated clearly. "I purchased this house last year. These individuals entered without my permission while I was away on business and began renovations without my consent." Rachel jumped in, her voice rising. That's not true, we had permission. Tell them, Julio. You gave me a key. I gave you an emergency key last year. When I asked you to water my plants while I was at a coding boot camp, I corrected. I never authorized you to enter my home while I was away this time, and I certainly never gave permission for any renovations or for you to move in. Marcus stepped forward, trying a different approach. Look, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Julio and Rachel are siblings, and we were just trying to help improve his house. We had an agreement. Can you provide any documentation of this agreement? The second officer asked. Marcus faltered. Well, no, it was verbal. But Julio knew we were planning to stay with him for a while. Right, Julio. This is the first I heard of any plans for you to move in, I stated firmly. I returned home yesterday to find my house being demolished without my knowledge or consent. The building inspector returned from his initial assessment, shaking his head. This is serious. You've got exposed electrical wiring, structural modifications to load-bearing walls, improper plumbing work, all without permits or inspections. This is extremely dangerous and completely illegal. I'm issuing a stop work order immediately. He turned to the workers who had paused their demolition when we arrived. Who hired you for this job? One of the workers gestured to Walter. That guy, paying us cash. The inspector turned to Walter. Sir, are you a licensed contractor in this state? Walter shifted uncomfortably. My license is in process of renewal. So that's a no, the inspector noted, writing something on his clipboard. Hiring unlicensed workers for cash to perform unpermitted work is a serious violation. There will be fines. While this conversation was happening, Patricia had pulled Rachel aside, whispering urgently to her. I could see Rachel's face reddening as she shook her head in disagreement. Patricia seemed to be insisting on something, pushing Rachel toward me. Finally, Rachel approached, her expression a mixture of desperation and anger. Julio, please don't do this. We're family. You know Marcus lost his job and I'm pregnant. We need help right now. Where are we supposed to go? You could have asked me for help, I replied, keeping my voice level. Instead, you broke into my home, destroyed my property, and tried to take over my house while I was away. That's not what family does to each other. We didn't break in, she protested. I had a key, which was for emergencies only, not for this, I countered. And you knew that, which is why you waited until I was out of town to do all this. The first officer intervened at this point. Ma'am, using a key that was provided for a specific limited purpose to enter a property without the owner's knowledge and consent, especially to cause property damage or make unauthorized changes, can still constitute unlawful entry. Rachel's strategy quickly shifted to emotional manipulation. So you're just going to throw your pregnant sister out on the street? Mom and Dad would be so ashamed of you right now. I'm not responsible for the situation you've created, I said firmly. And I think Mom and Dad would be more ashamed of someone who tries to take advantage of family and steal their home. Walter stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. Now listen here. We've already invested thousands in these renovations. You can't just kick us out after we've put money into this place. Actually, he can, Thomas said, arriving right on cue. I had texted him when we reached the house, and he had come to provide legal support. Mr. Vega is the legal owner of this property. You have no lease, no rental agreement, and no legal right to be here or to make any modifications to his property. In fact, what you've done constitutes trespassing, property damage, and potentially criminal mischief. Who are you? Marcus demanded. Thomas Anderson, attorney at law, he replied, handing Marcus his card. I represent Mr. Vega in this matter. The atmosphere grew tenser as Walter realized the seriousness of the situation. This is ridiculous. We're family. You can't bring lawyers and police into a family matter. You brought contractors and demolition crews into my home without permission, I replied calmly. This stopped being just a family matter when you decided to destroy my property. The officers, having assessed the situation, approached Rachel, Marcus, Walter, and Patricia. Based on the homeowner's statements and the evidence of unauthorized construction, we're going to ask all of you to leave the premises immediately. Any personal belongings can be collected under our supervision, but the construction needs to stop now, and you need to vacate the property. Rachel's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "Where are we supposed to go? You know we can't afford our apartment anymore." I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything, but remained firm. "That's something you should have considered before attempting to take over my house without asking. You can stay in a hotel until you figure things out, just like I had to do last night when I found my home uninhabitable." Marcus put his arm around Rachel, glaring at me. "Come on, babe. We don't need his help. Your brother is clearly more concerned about his precious house than his own family." Patricia chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. "I always said your brother was selfish. Family means nothing to him." I refused to engage with their attempts to villainize me for protecting my property. Instead, I turned to the officers. "I'd like to file a formal report about the property damage and unauthorized entry. And I'll need documentation for my insurance company as well." While the officers began their formal documentation, the workers were instructed to secure any hazardous areas they had created, but to cease all renovation work. I approached them privately and explained that I would pay them for their day's work even though they had to stop, as they were simply hired help and not responsible for the deception. They seemed relieved and appreciative of this gesture. Over the next 2 hours, Rachel, Marcus, and his parents gathered their personal belongings under the watchful eyes of the police officers. The moving truck that had begun to unload their furniture now had to reload everything. The atmosphere was tense, with occasional outbursts from Walter about ungrateful relatives and family betrayal. As they prepared to leave, Rachel approached me one last time, her eyes red from crying. "I hope you're happy now," she said bitterly. "You've ruined everything." "No, Rachel. You did that when you decided to take advantage of me, instead of simply asking for help," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the emotional toll this confrontation was taking. "If you had come to me honestly about your situation, we could have figured something out together. But I can't trust you after this." She didn't respond, merely turning away to join Marcus at their car. As they drove away with Walter and Patricia following in their SUV, I felt a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and resolve. The confrontation had been necessary, but I took no joy in it. The locksmith arrived shortly after they left, and I immediately had all the locks changed and a new security system installed. The building inspector provided me with a detailed report of all the code violations and unsafe conditions created by the unauthorized work, which would be essential for my insurance claim. Thomas stayed throughout the process, ensuring all legal aspects were properly handled. By late afternoon, my home was finally empty of unwelcome guests, though the physical damage remained as a stark reminder of how quickly trust can be broken and relationships damaged. The road to restoring my house and potentially my relationship with my sister would be long and challenging. The days following the confrontation were a blur of insurance adjusters, contractors, and cleaning crews. The damage to my home was even more extensive than I had initially realized. Beyond the obvious demolition of the bathroom and kitchen, there were numerous smaller issues that emerged upon closer inspection: scratched hardwood floors from dragging heavy items, holes in walls from removed fixtures, damaged electrical outlets, and even a cracked window that no one had mentioned. The insurance adjuster spent nearly 4 hours documenting everything, taking photographs and making detailed notes about each item that needed repair or replacement. My comprehensive homeowner's policy would cover most of the damage minus my deductible, but the process would take time. The adjuster explained that cases involving family members often required additional documentation to prove the damage wasn't authorized. Thankfully, my police report and the building inspector's assessment provided that evidence. "I've seen similar situations before," the adjuster told me as we walked through the gutted kitchen. "Family disputes over property can be some of the most destructive cases we handle. People often feel entitled to take liberties with relatives' homes that they would never consider with strangers. Finding my carefully chosen fixtures proved impossible. The soaking tub from the master bathroom had indeed been taken to a salvage yard and already resold. My custom kitchen cabinets were damaged beyond repair during their removal. The quartz countertops that Rachel claimed had been donated were actually sold to a local contractor for a quick cash payment that Walter had pocketed. Each discovery felt like a fresh betrayal, a reminder that my sister and her in-laws hadn't just invaded my space. They had systematically dismantled it for their own benefit, with no regard for the time, money, and emotional investment I had put into making my house a home. The first night I was able to stay in my house again was strange and unsettling. With the bathroom partially functional thanks to emergency repairs and the kitchen reduced to a refrigerator plugged into an extension cord, I felt like a visitor in my own home. The spaces that had once brought me comfort now felt violated, their familiarity stripped away, along with the fixtures and finishes I had so carefully selected. I slept poorly that night, waking at every creak and settling noise, half expecting to find Rachel and her family had somehow returned. The new security system provided some peace of mind, but the psychological impact of having my sanctuary invaded lingered. The next morning brought the first wave of family fallout. My phone rang at 7 a.m., my parents calling from Arizona where they had retired 3 years ago. "Julio, what is going on? Rachel called us crying last night saying you had the police throw her and Marcus out of your house." My mother began, her voice tight with worry and disapproval. I took a deep breath and calmly explained the situation, how I had returned early to find my home being demolished without my knowledge or permission, how Rachel and Marcus had planned to move in without asking, and how Walter and Patricia had orchestrated much of it. "She had nowhere else to go, and you know she's pregnant," my father interjected. "Family helps family, son. That's how we raised you." "I would have helped if she had asked," I replied. "But she didn't ask. She broke in while I was away and destroyed my home. That's not asking for help, that's taking advantage." My mother sighed heavily. "She says she had a key. How is that breaking in?" "The key was for emergencies and specific times. When I asked her to check on the house, I explained patiently. Not to let herself in whenever she wanted, especially not to gut my kitchen and bathroom without permission." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with my parents vacillating between understanding my position and feeling I had been too harsh with Rachel. It was clear they had heard a very different version of events from my sister, one that minimized the damage and unauthorized nature of the renovations, while emphasizing her pregnancy and financial difficulties. "Just promise me you'll think about helping her find a new place," my mother finally said. "She's still your sister, and that baby is still your niece or nephew." I agreed to consider ways to help Rachel that didn't involve her taking over my home, a compromise that seemed to satisfy my parents for the moment. Over the next few days, the family divisions deepened. Extended family members began taking sides, often based on incomplete or biased information. My cousin Elena called to express support after seeing photos I had sent my parents of the damage. "What Rachel did was wrong, no question," she said firmly. "No one has the right to invade your space like that, family or not." Others were less understanding. My uncle Roberto sent a lengthy text message admonishing me for not being more accommodating to a pregnant woman in need, ignoring the fact that accommodation hadn't been requested. My home had been invaded and altered without consent. The most surprising call came from Marcus's sister Jasmine, who contacted me out of the blue. "I wanted you to know that this isn't the first time my parents have pulled something like this," she said hesitantly. "They did something similar to my grandparents, gradually taking over their house, until my grandparents felt like guests in their own home. It caused a huge rift in the family." Her insight confirmed my suspicions about Walter and Patricia's calculated approach. This hadn't been an impulsive decision, but a deliberate strategy they had employed before. While navigating this emotional terrain, I was also coordinating the physical rebuilding of my home. The insurance company approved my claim, allowing me to hire legitimate contractors to begin repairs. The process was slow and expensive. Even with insurance covering most costs, there were upgrades and permits that came out of my pocket. The building inspector had found several issues that needed to be brought up to code problems that had been created by Walter's careless approach to construction. Friends proved invaluable during this period. Thomas continued to provide legal advice, especially when Walter threatened to sue me for the money he had invested in the renovations. My college friend Miguel, who worked in construction management, helped me find reputable contractors and negotiated better prices on materials. Another friend, Diana, spent an entire weekend helping me clean and organize the areas that weren't under construction. As the physical rebuilding progressed, I discovered additional evidence of just how calculated Rachel and Marcus's plan had been. A neighbor mentioned that Rachel had introduced herself as the new homeowner weeks before the incident, explaining that her brother was selling her the house since he was relocating for work. Another neighbor had been told a similar story about me accepting a job in Chicago and letting family take over the mortgage. More disturbingly, I found several pieces of mail addressed to Marcus and Rachel that had been delivered to my address and neatly filed away in a drawer: bills, bank statements, even a voter registration confirmation. They had been establishing residency at my address long before the actual attempt to move, in creating a paper trail that could have complicated an eviction process had they succeeded in their plan. These discoveries strengthened my resolve to maintain firm boundaries with Rachel and her family, despite the ongoing pressure from some family members to reconcile and put this behind us. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. It had been a deliberate attempt to take advantage of me and essentially steal my home. 3 weeks after the confrontation with my kitchen and bathroom still under reconstruction, I received a text from Rachel. It was the first direct communication since the day the police had escorted her from my property. "I found an apartment," she wrote. "Not as nice as what we had before, but it's something. Thought you should know since Mom keeps asking if you're helping us." I replied cautiously, "I'm glad you found a place. Let me know if you need help with the security deposit or first month's rent." Her response came quickly. "We don't need your charity. Just thought you'd want to tell Mom you can stop feeling guilty now." The message stung, but it also reinforced that Rachel still didn't understand or acknowledge the inappropriateness of what she had done. In her mind, I was the villain who had failed to help family in need, not the victim of a calculated attempt to take over my property. With each passing day, as the contractors slowly restored my home to its original state, or as close as possible, given some fixtures couldn't be replaced exactly, I began to reclaim my sense of ownership and security. New locks, a comprehensive security system, and careful attention to who had access to my property became my new normal. The experience changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. My natural inclination to help family remained, but it was now tempered with a clearer understanding of boundaries and the importance of protecting what I had worked so hard to achieve. Trust, once broken, proved difficult to rebuild, especially when the other party refused to acknowledge the breach in the first place. 1 year has passed since that shocking day when I returned early from my business trip to find my house under unauthorized renovation. The physical restoration of my home was completed 6 months ago, though some things could never be exactly the same. The new kitchen cabinets, while beautiful, don't have the same handcrafted details as the originals. The bathroom tile pattern I loved is no longer manufactured, so I had to select something similar but not identical. These small differences serve as daily reminders of what happened, though they no longer carry the sharp sting they once did. The impact on my family relationships has been more complex and enduring than the physical damage to my home. For the first 3 months after the incident, Rachel and I didn't speak at all. My parents tried to mediate arranging a family dinner that ended with Rachel walking out when I refused to apologize for involving the police. Marcus remained hostile, blaming me for their financial struggles, rather than acknowledging his own role in the situation. Walter and Patricia cut off all contact with me, though I heard through family channels that they faced legal consequences for the unpermitted work and operating without a valid contractor's license. The fines they incurred apparently strained their retirement savings, leading to additional tension between them and Marcus. Gradually, tiny steps toward reconciliation began to emerge. When Rachel reached her 3rd trimester, she sent me a sonogram picture with a brief note. "Thought you might want to see your future niece." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of our continued family connection despite everything that had happened. I responded with a gift card to a baby store and a simple message of congratulations. This small exchange opened the door to cautious, limited communication. When my niece Sophia was born 4 months ago, Rachel allowed me to visit them in the hospital, a tense but important moment of family reconnection. My parents finally came to understand my perspective better after visiting my fully restored home and seeing photographs of the damage that had been done. "I had no idea it was this bad," my father admitted, surveying the before and after pictures. Rachel told us it was just some minor updates. The experience forced me to establish clearer boundaries with all family members. No one has a key to my home anymore except for a trusted neighbor who checks on things when I travel. I installed a smart doorbell system that allows me to monitor who comes to my door even when I'm away. These security measures aren't just physical protections, they represent a psychological boundary that I now recognize as healthy and necessary. Working with a therapist helped me process the complex emotions surrounding the incident. Initially, I struggled with guilt for involving authorities in a family matter, despite knowing I had every right to protect my property. The therapist helped me recognize that my sister's actions were a continuation of childhood patterns where boundaries were ignored and my possessions weren't respected. Family relationships should be based on mutual respect, not obligation or exploitation. My therapist explained during one particularly insightful session, loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to take advantage of you. This perspective helped me find balance in how I approached rebuilding my relationship with Rachel. I could offer support within clearly defined boundaries, helping with specific baby expenses, occasionally babysitting my niece, providing job leads for Marcus without surrendering my autonomy or property. 3 months ago, Rachel finally acknowledged in her own way that what they had done was wrong. We were sitting on my newly restored back deck, while Sophia napped inside, and she said quietly, "We should have just asked you for help. I know that now." It wasn't a full apology, but it was progress, an admission that their approach had been inappropriate. I simply nodded and said, "Yes, you should have." We left it at that, neither of us ready to fully dissect what had happened, but both recognizing it as a turning point in our adult relationship. My relationship with Marcus remains strained. He found a new job at a different dealership, but still harbors resentment about how events unfolded. His parents rarely come to visit Rachel and Sophia at their apartment, having relocated to a retirement community in Florida shortly after the incident. The distance has actually been beneficial for Rachel and Marcus's marriage, forcing them to become more independent and self-sufficient. As for me, my home is once again my sanctuary, though I view it differently now. What was once simply a symbol of personal achievement has become a physical representation of my boundaries and self-respect. I've made peace with the fact that maintaining healthy relationships sometimes requires difficult decisions and uncomfortable confrontations. Last week, I hosted a small dinner party for close friends who had supported me through the ordeal. As we enjoyed drinks on the patio overlooking the garden I had planted this spring, Diana raised her glass in a toast to new beginnings and hard-earned wisdom. Those words captured perfectly what this challenging year has taught me. Family bonds are precious, but they must be built on mutual respect and honest communication. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the most important ones to maintain. I still care deeply for my sister, and am building a relationship with my niece, but I do so with clearer expectations and stronger boundaries. True family supports each other's growth and success without exploitation or entitlement. This understanding has led to more authentic, if more limited, relationships with my extended family. The house that was nearly taken from me has been fully reclaimed, not just physically, but emotionally. Each room once again reflects my choices and preferences. Each space honors my journey and hard work. And most importantly, I've reclaimed the peace of mind that comes from knowing that my boundaries will be respected because I've learned to stand firm in protecting what matters to me. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who cross the line? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the healthiest relationships. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement in setting their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. Take care of yourselves and each other.